Since what I have here is a floor plan drawing, and floor plans require dimensions so that people like contractors would be able to build the walls, install the windows, install the doors, and do other various activities, I need dimensions. So I'm going to add these dimensions in on this drawing as an example. I've left myself room so that none of my dimensions will overlap either the items that I'm dimensioning nor the border here. The invisible border that shows up is fine for your dimensions to cross and overlap, but may not overlap your border or any portion of your title block. You're also not going to allow your dimensions to cross each other. So I'm going to show you some tricks in terms of how to do multiple dimensions on one side without creating problems. The dimensioning tool is actually up here in this very tip-top menu and looks like an angled line with arrows on both sides. When you click this, I ask you to save your project if you haven't done so in a while. You want to, before you lay any dimensions down, make sure you know what you're dimensioning to. As we've done before, we want to change wall centerline to wall faces. This is more likely what we would know when we were dimensioning. I'm going to then dimension this whole length here from this wall face to this wall face. Oh, excuse me. I can't do it on this drawing. I have to actually do it back in the floor plan. Now, you might remember from before, we cropped this down. However, I can extend my dimensions past the crop line and they will still show up. So I am going to make sure that I pick this wall face and this wall face and bring this out to show you that that distance is 20 feet. I can pick this wall face and this wall face, and what I just created is what's called a baseline dimension. I'm measuring from a baseline to multiple different sides or multiple different locations. From the other direction, I'm going to go from this wall face to the start of the window. I'm then going to go from the start of the window to the end of the window to show the thickness. You'll notice I'll line them up like that. What I just created here is what's called a chained dimension, where I'm measuring from one feature to another and then from that feature to another. Doing that more than twice tends to cause some errors, so it wouldn't recommend it. I will also point out that you will see that I made the smaller dimensions closer to the object and the larger dimensions out here. If I were to modify this dimension and say move it outside, you would see that I now have a crossing dimension. That is a problem, and that is something we do not do. I also don't want to do something where my text overlaps another line. It'll cause a break as well as some confusion. We want to make sure we allow ample space between dimensions so it's very clear that this measurement belongs to this set of dimension lines. I do want to show the size and the location of objects. You'll notice for this window, you not only know that it's 4 feet wide, but you also know that it's 6 feet 7 inches from the inside of the wall to where that opening starts. You will also see that I did not dimension the distance here. Okay? If I needed to find this distance, I could add these up as well as the thickness of this wall here and subtract it from the overall. This rule is called the rule of simple math. If we can figure out a dimension using simple math, we do not label it. I would then use the tool to further dimension the objects. I'm going to go from the inside wall there, the inside wall here, leaving myself some space to dimension both the door opening and the distance from the door opening to the inside wall. I can either line those up so they match, or I can move it out so that my things do not overlap. If I set something down and it doesn't quite work out, I can click the Modify tool, click on something, and use these points to move things around. I'm going to move this 1 foot mark over slightly so it's not impeding that line. If I was doing this for credit, I would also add dimensions of this window, the location of the window from this inside edge to this inside edge, move this measurement using the dot out a little bit, and it'll create itself what's called a leader line, attaches the measurement to that. I would also add dimensions of this wall overall, inside to inside here, inside to inside here, as well as inside to inside here. Knowing that I may have some space to do so, I can also dimension these interior openings, such as doing that one there. And for something different, I'm going to show this one as being dimensioned on opposite sides. This is still doable. However, I would probably move this number to the other side so that you could see my extension lines. I'm also going to measure this one here, as well as the distance here. Going back to modify and moving the measurement, as well as moving this down slightly and moving this one down slightly to make sure that everything's much more clear. I didn't like how this was basically up in the window, so we'll move that down a little bit. This drawing is fully dimensioned. Move that a little closer. I'm also going to move this a little closer because I didn't end up needing all that space. But again, not too close where things start to overlap or get confusing. The main reason I'm worried about some of these sticking out too far is that I don't want to go back to my sheet and see anything hanging over or overlapping. I can also grab this viewport and slide it over slightly to make sure that everything still stays fairly centered on the drawing. Because I already had this set up and scaled, my numbers were nice and small and were not overlapping anything, and I was able to dimension this drawing and know exactly how big the numbers would be. That's the main advantage of placing it on the sheet and then going back and dimensioning it, even though I have to dimension it in the floor plan itself. Many people might want to do this before placing it on the sheet, but again, you want to do this after, because if these numbers were much larger, I might have moved these out much further and it would have scaled down the text, okay, after I was doing it. So that is the proper order. This is a floor plan that is ready to print.